Yeah, so last day we discussed about linear search, right? So there I mentioned that in an array of any length, so in this case the length is 5, we can do a linear search by searching a key with all the elements one by one in the array. However, if we get the key at some point of time, I mean I mean suppose the key basically matches with an element of the array, then we are done, right? We don't need to continue the loop, we can break. But although we have identified the location of occurrence of the key, it may also be required to print a message in case the key is not found. So that can be done by a number of ways. So one of the ways, I mean, which I find, I mean, logically appealing, is you can set a variable found equals to 0. Found indicates that whether that key has been found or not. So since logically, since here the value of found is set to 0, as long as found is 0, I mean, we would know that the key has not been found. But the moment it matches, the key matches with any one element of that array, so we can print that particular message that it has been found at particular position. We can send found and we can break, which means that the control will come out of the loop. So there are going to several ways of checking whether the search has failed, right? So I mentioned that we can do this. So we can check if found is still 0, because we don't know in general, because the control will come to this place anyway, right? So if this is printed or not printed, we need some indication of what has happened, whether the search is successful or not. So if the value of this variable found, I mean, remains 0 after control comes here, we can be sure that the search has failed. So we can print this message. So this is I mean, this is basically important because the control will come here anyway, right? Because I mean, either the search is successful or the search is unsuccessful, this loop is going to terminate. So we can wait till it terminates towards the end, which is not a very efficient way, because after we have achieved our objective, which is finding the key, there is no need to continue this particular check, because as I mentioned several times in the class, that I mean, checking operation is the key operation, or is the basically the most important operation when it comes to, I mean, basically efficiency of an algorithm. So when we know that we don't need to do this check, we should not be doing it. That's why we can break. So in this particular case, if we do break, then the loop will terminate before it reaches its terminating condition, which is I is less than 5, right? So this will continue until I is less than 5. So it will, in general, if this condition is false, it will run from I equal to 0, I mean, through I equal to 1, I equal to 2, I equals to 3, and I equal to 4. Whenever this becomes false, that is I becomes 5. So I'm incrementing I by 1, right? Then it will terminate. So I mean, remember I said that there will be an I mean, initialization once before the loop starts, and after initialization there will be check here. And if this is true, only in that situation this body will be executed, and after this body is executed, there will be an increment and there will be a check again. So what will happen if this condition is false? What will happen? This condition will never be true, so there won't be any break. Then the loop will continue. I mean, if the loop will continue as long as this condition is true. When it becomes false, that is this I becomes 5, it will come out. So if we can check if I is equal to 5, which means that the loop has terminated normally. It has not, I mean, it is not terminated by force using break. Otherwise, this I mean, basically never would have been 5, right? It would have, I mean, come out of the loop, I mean, much before that, because this array runs from I mean, indices 0 to 4, right? Even if you I mean, would have found this key, so suppose if the key is 9, if the key were at the last position, then also it will break uh, when I equals to 4, right? So I would have never reached the end, the final condition where I mean the where this condition becomes false. So checking this will also work. But that I thought that that would require some knowledge about how exactly the I mean loop works. But it seems that found equal to 0 I mean is logically easier to understand. But several other things can happen. You can check again if AI equals to P. If this is true, then the search is successful, right? Because I mean that's why we have come out of this. So this is important to see that even if the element is at the end and we do the search and sorry, we run this particular algorithm, it will work and it will terminate at this point of time when I was 4, right? So I, in this case also, when the key to be found is at the end, I will never reach 5. Okay, so this is a tricky situation, right? I mean, it seems so because what will happen if it is at the I mean, last position, where I will be incremented, what would be the value of I when this particular thing happens? That could have uh, been an issue, but it is not a problem. If I set key as 10, which is not present, that will also work. Search failed. So this is one, I mean, minor thing I just discussed with you because someone had doubts regarding this. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk something about arrays. Okay, so before doing that, since there is a class test the next day, I would be interested to see how much conversant you have become with basically this looping and any functionality that can be done using the loops, the checks, and all these things. So this is a number. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the example I gave you. So what is the logic behind it? So from the number, so we are taking the advantage of the fact that the number is an integer. So if we do an integer division, the last digit will be eliminated, right? And we'll want that last digit to be the first digit of the number which we are looking to generate. That's the reverse, right? So that's exactly what we need to do. We have to extract the last digit of this number. So this is the number we want to reverse. Okay. So if we divide it by 10, so think about this number. If it was float, then okay, don't make it so complicated. So if you basically divide this by number, you will get I mean divide this number by 10, you will get 5 as a remainder, right? So that is the last digit of this number. So what we do here, so I initialize a variable to 0. So that variable will be my reverse number. So initially it is empty, right? There are no digits there. So I multiply this by 10. So it'll get 0 plus the last digit. So last digit in this case is 5. So reverse now contains 5. Now I remove the last digit from this number. So we are left with 1, 2, 3, 4. Next, so this number is I mean this NUM has now reduced from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 1, 2, 3, 4, but it is still not 0. When will it be 0? When all the digits are gone, right? So now we are interested in the last digit of the new number, which is 1, 2, 3, 4. So by doing this, we'll get 4. What was the last number? What was the last value of this reverse? That was 5, right? So we multiply 5 by 10, we get 50 plus 4, we get 54. So you see that this part of the string is already reversed. So we get 54. And we again divide the current number, that is 1, 2, 3, 4 by 10, so that we get 1, 2, 3, and we go on. So it will first reduce to 1, 2, 3, 4, then reduce to 1, 2, 3, then to 1, 2, then to 1, and then to 0. So at that point of time, this loop will be terminated. So let me go through the output for the sake of completeness. You see that what I'm doing here, I am generating a last digit at every step, and I'm printing the resulting number, and I'm printing the reversed number. So I am so last digit is this variable, so num %10. So I'm getting 5, right? Last digit is 5, and I divide the number by 10. So the number now becomes 1, 2, 3, 4, since this number is an integer. And anyway, this is I mean integer arithmetic, because this percentage won't work for float. So this problem is not really valid for the floating point. And we get the reverse number by this. So reverse is initially 0. You see, reverse is 0. So 0 into 10 plus 5, we get 5. So now it checks if the number is 0 or not. So the number is 1, 2, 3, 4. So it is not 0. Then at the next iteration of the loop, we again generate the last digit. So from 1, 2, 3, 4, we get 4. And the new number is 1, 2, 3, because 4 has now gone away. And the reverse number is generated by multiplying this. Multiplying this 5 into multiplying this by 10. So it becomes 50 plus 4. It is 54. The next iteration, we get 3 from 1 to 3 as a last digit, and number now reduces to 12. The reverse number is 54 into 10, that is 540, plus the last digit is 543. Then at the next step, we get the last digit of 12 as 2, and the number now reduces to 1. The reverse number is 543 into 10, that is 5430 plus 2, so 5432. And at the final step, we get the remaining digit as a last digit. If you divide this by 10, you get 1. And now it becomes 0. The reverse number is 54320 plus 1, that is 54321. Now remember, this number has become 0, and this false, this while loop's condition will be false now. So it will come out of the loop and it will print this, the number. So you remember that this number is now 0. So to retain that particular number, I have used a dummy variable which contained the initial copy of the number, because otherwise we will basically lose what was the initial variable, right? So for that purpose, num copy now contains the original number, and rev contains the reverse number. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 was the original number, and the reverse number is 54321. I hope it is clear. So we have used a lot of arrays. So let's get formally introduced to arrays. So I'm sure you know what arrays are, but let's go through them one more time. So the array, so what basically are arrays? So array is a group of related data items which shares a common name. By common name, I mean the same name. So marks 10 is an array of 10 variables of the same type. That is important. So you can't create an array of where the first element is an integer, second element is a float. You can't do that. And you can give a meaningful name to the array if you are using it for a particular purpose. For example, you want to store the marks of 10 students, then for a particular subject, say which is known to you. So then you can name the array variable as marks, and 10 indicates the size of the array. So it takes contiguous memory allocation. I mean, we will cover this later on when we discuss pointers. And each member is accessed by an index. which starts from 0. So this is array is perhaps the simplest and the most used basically data structure. So this is a data structure also. So which has the advantage of direct access. So within the within basically the scope of the array or the range of the array. So here the range will be 0 to 9, right? For this particular example, you can directly access any element you want. But there can be some data structures where you cannot access any data element you want. So I will come to them later on. So the advantage of arrays is this: you can directly access any element you want. Okay, so the formal format is like this. There will be a variable name like say marks. There will be size of the array, that is the number of elements in the array, and type is the data type. So int marks means integer marks of 10 of size 10. So there can be maximum 10 elements with the indices 0 to 9. So marks I means the ith element of the array marks, where I runs from I to size -1. Okay, 0. So marks 0 to mark size -1 are the elements of the array. Okay, so if we talk about initialization, so we have seen this in several previous examples, right? So if you set marks 5 equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then marks 0 will be 1, marks 1 will be 2, like this, or marks 4 will be 5. But if you do not explicitly provide the values of all the array elements on the right hand side, the remaining values will be set to 0. So in this case 1, 2, 3, if you do this, then marks 0 will be 1, marks 1 will be 2, marks 2 will be 3, marks 3 will be 0, and marks 4 will be 0. Okay. And a string is a special type of array. So it is an array of characters. So if you can write this, it will work. Oh, this is an important point. So when you initialize a string like this, it is nice to end it by a \0, because as I will mention when I will discuss pointers, but I have already told about this before. So in string, basically the compiler is interested in the starting address of the basically the string. So it likes to keep a flag or an indicator of where it ends. So the string ends with \0 by default. So this is not, I mean, visible for the, to the users. But if you want to explicitly store all the elements or all the elements of this array, which are, so each element is a character here, you can set the last element as \0, but the size of this array will be, or basically the size of the string will be 3. So this will not be considered. So the string will be up to this point. You can also set this. This also works. Okay, so let's look at one example of one-dimensional arrays. I've already written the code for you. Okay, so here, all right. So suppose I have an array of this length, and I don't know the length of the array yet. So I want to find the length of that array automatically. So what can I do? So this is an integer type of array, right? So for integer type of array, if you use size of num, it will give you the total size of the array. So let me print this and let's see what happens. Okay. Size value. Okay. What am I going to print? Okay. So I printed these two. So 20 and 4. What is 20? It is a total size, total space in the memory taken by the array num. So you see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 integers. So for this particular compiler, the size of an integer is 4 bytes. So the total size of this array is 20. So size of num, which is the array, and size of int, which is 4. So if I want to know the number of elements in that array, I can use this. Size of num, that is 20, divided by size of int, that is size of one integer type of variable, that is 4. So 20 by 4 gives you 5, which is the size of this array. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is one way of doing it. So this is an example where you find the maximum of any maximum of the numbers which are stored in this particular array. So this can be of any length you want, right? So we did some programming using if else, where finding the maximum of 3 numbers were getting quite complicated. So here we are doing it for 5 numbers, and I'm just using this. So I am running this from, so I am storing max, basically numbers is the first element in max, and I'm checking the other elements. So starting from 1 to size minus 1. So I is less than size, which, so since I is an integer, it will be one integer less than size. Okay. So if num is greater than max, it will store num. If num I is greater than max, sorry, max will now contain num I. So this logic is simple enough. So this is an example of how loops are useful. So how easy it makes a calculation. So the number of checks is same, but it makes uh, the algorithm and basically the convenience of solving a problem much more, right? So if I can run this again, maybe. So you see that it will print max as 45, which is correct. This is correct. So this is just a demo of a simple array, and this is an implementation of finding the max using array. Okay. So this is a code again. So we now have two-dimensional arrays. So it is very similar to one-dimensional arrays, except for the dimension. So int marks 10, 5, which means that integer type, marks is the name of variable, 10 is the number of rows, and 5 is the number of columns. So it's basically a matrix. So if you look at the access format, marks ij is the element at the jth row and the ith column. Okay, so I runs from 0 to number of rows minus 1, and so there's a mistake. This will be j. Okay, so this runs from 0 to number of columns minus 1. This, okay, what did I do? So it will start from 0 and end at number of columns minus 1. So here you see that the elements look like this: 0, 0, 0, 1, 0 dot 0 j dot 0 number of columns minus 1. So this is the 0th row. Like this is first row, this is ith row, this is the last row. Number of rows minus 1. So these are the columns. So So this is the first column. The column remains 0, right? So 0. So the column, I mean, this is the first column of the matrix. This is the last column of the matrix or matrix, whatever it is. Okay. So for the sake of completeness, let's look at one example. Before that, let's look at some initialization techniques. So in an array of dimension 3, 2, 3 rows and 2 columns, you can do initialization like this. So you consider that there are 3 rows, and in each row there are 2 columns, right? So 2, 5 are the elements of the first row. These are elements of second row. These are elements of the third row. You can also do this, and it will, since you have basically already set the number of rows and columns as 3 and 2 respectively. If you simply write this, it will understand, the compiler will understand that this is the first row, this is the second row, this is the third row. It will automatically do that. You can also do it like this. These 3 are equivalent, and if you do this, then all the elements will be set to 0, will be initialized to 0. So there is a problem in the arrays of C, that you cannot automatically assign all the elements of an array to a particular value except 0. So you can set it to 0 like this, but not to any other value. So that is one drawback. Okay, so I believe we have all done matrix multiplication implementation in Python. Before that, I'm sure everyone did matrix multiplication before. So just covering the basics again. So this is one matrix A, this is another matrix B. So first, there is a check that whether these two matrices can be multiplied or not. So for that to be possible, the number of columns of the first matrix, so we are doing a multiplication in this order, right? A into B and not B into A. Okay, so in this particular in this particular order, we need to satisfy the condition that the number of columns of the first matrix should be equal to the number of rows of the second matrix. So the number of columns of A should be equal to the number of rows in B. And if this is true, then we can determine the dimension of the product which will be generated after we do this multiplication. So that will be the number of rows of A cross the number of columns of B. So 3 cross 2. Okay. And how do we do the multiplication? The multiplication is all about the commonalities between these two matrices, right? So what is the common factor? The number of rows of the number of columns of A and the number of rows in B, right? So that is 3 in this case. So we multiply the elements of the first row with the elements of the first column of A and B respectively to generate the first element at 0, 0 of the product like this. So this into this plus this into this plus this into this will generate 21. Then like this we can go 2 into 5, this and this and this, and then it will be like this and this so to generate this to generate this, and this to generate this. So this is, basically school book stuff, right? So why I'm covering this? Because I'm going to show you the code for writing this. Okay, this is a long, clumsy code. So let me show you the code here. So I have initialized A33 to some values and B to some values, and the product I have initialized it to 0. So I am doing this check NC1, sorry, NC1 is the number of, so NC1 is the number of columns in A, and R1 is the number of rows in A, and you can understand the rest, right? So NC1, if NC1 is not equal to NR2, then basically this multiplication is invalid. Then we have branching for loop. So this stands for the number of rows of the output matrix, the number of columns of the output matrix, and this is the number of columns of the first matrix or the number of rows of the second matrix, because they are same, right? So we do this, we generate the elements like this. So have a look at this code. I hope this is something which you already know, but this is just for the sake of completeness. So this will print the product. So I will run from 0 to number of rows here. So here number of rows, and this will run from 0 to the number of columns of the second matrix. So this is going on like this, right? This for first row, this is first column, and this K is basically running from 0 to the number of columns in the first matrix or the number of rows of the second matrix. So we get the product like this, and we basically print the product. You see that we are getting the right answer. So this is just for the sake of completeness, since I've been talking about arrays for a long time now without formally introducing them. So here we have done it. So we also have the multi-dimensional arrays. So basically it is of this format. It's of a type 10, 5, 20. So these are the different dimensions, and I'm sure you will be able to understand what's going on here. All right then. So so here is some discussion of strings, though they are nothing but arrays of characters, but they have some functionalities of their own. So these are some basically string specific character specific functions. Like there can be function like is alpha C. The C is an alphabet type variable or an alphabet constant. It will check if C is, sorry, what did I say? C is a character type constant or character type variable. Okay, is alpha of C means, basically this function will return true if C is an alphabet, otherwise it will return false. Is digit, is alphanumeric, is space, is float. There are several such functionalities. Let's look at one program which I'm not going to run. I'm just going through it. So suppose I want to check whether a particular character which we take as input from the terminal, from the user, is an alphabet or not. Okay, so I can do this is alpha ch like this. So if this returns a non-zero value, that is 1, true value, then it will print C is an alphabet. Otherwise it will print it is not an alphabet, right? So if it is an alphabet, there is another check. It will check whether it is a lowercase or an uppercase. So you can check this also. Is lower ch, if this is true, means that ch is a lowercase alphabet, otherwise it is an uppercase alphabet. So it will print the messages on the screen appropriately. And there is another function called toUpper. What does that do? It will convert this particular variable, if it is in lowercase, to uppercase. So if it is in lowercase, it will convert it to uppercase. 2 lower means if it is in the uppercase, it will convert to lowercase. But if it is already in lowercase, I don't know what happens. Please, check that out. I think it will, return some error value, or it will not do anything, something like that. I've never done it, but you can check if you want. So if the output is like this, I input a character, so which is capital K, and which means that this statement will be true because it is an alphabet, right? So if it is an alphabet, then this first condition will be true, will be false. So this is, if you check, is lower, which will be false. So that's why it will print uppercase. K is uppercase, and then it will be converted to lowercase by 2 lower. That will be printed. So K has been converted to lowercase. Okay, this can be useful in some cases. For example, in an interactive system, you want someone to put answer to your question. So suppose, do you want to continue? And the answer is, say, yes or no. Someone can put y. For yes, someone can give y in lowercase or uppercase. So both should work in this case. So that you can check. Okay, so let's talk about some important string functions: strcat, strcmp, strcpy, and strlen. So strlen you already know. It's a number of characters in S1. S1 is a string. So in Python you can use plus, right, to concatenate 2 strings. Here in C that doesn't work. And in Python you can do strcmp. Sorry, you can basically use the equal to sign to compare 2 strings. That also doesn't work here. And you can copy one string to other. That also doesn't work here. So what can we do for C? Let's take an example. So we can do this. So we take 3 strings: S1 that is Kripa, S2 that is Bandhu, and S3 that is Ghosh. So I first demonstrate strcat. So strcat of this function means that S1 will now contain S1 concatenated with S2. Okay, so S1 will be overwritten. So let's run this. So after this line, so S1 was Kripa, right? So after you did this, so S1 will now contain Kripa and Bandhu. So there won't be any spaces unless you put that explicitly. So Kripa and Bandhu will be pasted together. They will be concatenated. I'm sure you know what concatenation means. There will not be anything in between. So, and S2 will not be affected. S2 will, basically remain as Bandhu. Okay. And then we use strcpy, which means that S2 will be copied to S1. So you keep one thing in mind, that the size of S1 should be enough to accommodate for S2 if S2 is greater than S1, but some compilers automatically take that into account. So in this case, S1, so S1 is Kripa Bandhu, right, after this line. So if I copy this, S2 will be copied to S1. So S2 will, keep this in mind, that the right hand side is never affected. Only the left hand side, basically the string on the left hand side will be affected. So S2 will be copied to S1. So S1 will now become Bandhu because S2 is Bandhu, and S2 will remain as Bandhu. And finally we do, so this was strcat which will concatenate Kripa and Bandhu, strcpy which copies S2 to S1. In both the cases, S2 will remain unchanged, and strcmp compares these 2 strings, S1 and S3 in this case. If they are same, exactly the same, then STR-CMP will return 0. Otherwise, it will return non-zero, but that also has some meaning. Okay. Yeah, that has some meaning. What is that? So what I am comparing STR-CMP S1 and S3. So yeah, that's it. That's it. I think that's it. So percent schedule function. Yeah, but if I mean basically these two strings are different, then it will return a non-zero value. So that's all. This can be useful to you in certain applications. We can do some applications later on.